The content on the Untold Tales channel is protected by copyright. Unauthorized use may result in legal liability. The gunfight erupted without warning. Brian and I were sitting in an old Chevy parked across from the warehouse. The damn night was thick, humid, heavy with the scent of damp asphalt and the acrid smoke drifting from a nearby factory. We were just supposed to watch, just run a simple surveillance op. But something went sideways. The first shot shattered the silence like a dying man's final gasp. Shit, Brian cursed, diving behind the car door. I yanked out my Glock, cursing under my breath. We'd been made. Figures were spilling out of the warehouse. Shouts filled the air, bullets slicing through the night above our heads. We scrambled out of the car, taking cover behind concrete blocks. We were just supposed to watch, and now they want us dead, Brian muttered through clenched teeth, peeking out to fire a burst. Screw them. I gritted my teeth and fired twice. One of the bastards, a tall guy with a neck tattoo, dropped flat on his back. They thought we were vulnerable, that they could overwhelm us with sheer numbers. They were wrong. Brian and I have been working together for 5 years. We knew each other better than our own families. He covered me, I covered him. A minute later, 3 of them were sprawled in growing puddles of blood. A 4th was crawling away, leaving a crimson trail like a wounded rat. The others, realizing we weren't just 2 dumb cops but trained killers, began to panic. Their boss is still standing, I called out. And then a single gunshot rang out. I turned. Brian was standing over the convulsing body of Carlos Montoya, the cartel leader. Blood gurgled in Montoya's throat as his body twitched. "What the fuck did you do?" I barked. Brian just shrugged, holstering his pistol. Made our job easier. Easier? He was our key to the entire network, Brian. We needed him alive. Brian scoffed. "Come on, Charlie. You really think our bosses would have given us anything for this? A pat on the back, maybe. No promotion. No reward." I clenched my jaw, my pulse hammering. "There's enough cash in those crates to tell this shitty job to go to hell." Brian nodded toward the warehouse. "Let's take it, Charlie. This money doesn't belong to anyone." "You're serious?" "Dead serious. You know how much they pay us? Cops who put their asses on the line every damn day. And for what?" I stared at him, at the sweat on his forehead, the glint of greed in his eyes, the way his fingers still gripped his gun too tightly. "Brian, did you forget who we are?" He stepped closer, his voice lowering. "I remember exactly who I am, Charlie. A man who's tired of being a pawn." I clenched my fists. "I'm still a cop, Brian. And so are you, you son of a bitch." The night swallowed us whole, thick with the scent of smoke, blood, and betrayal. I searched Brian's face for hesitation, for some flicker of the partner I once knew. But there was nothing, just cold calculation. He sighed, ran a hand down his face. "Fine, Charlie. Have it your way." He took a step back, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Let's get out of here." Relief flickered in my chest. We'd been through hell together. I knew he made the wrong call, but maybe, just maybe, he wasn't beyond saving. I turned, scanning the scene for any loose ends we needed to clean up. Then the gunshot. A heavy blow slammed into my back. The world flipped upside down. I collapsed to my knees, gasping for air that had suddenly turned to molten lead in my lungs. My chest burned, every breath a ragged struggle, the taste of metal filling my mouth. I tried to lift a hand, but my fingers wouldn't obey. My body was shutting down. Brian loomed over me, looking down as if I were roadkill. "You fucked this up yourself, Charlie," he said, his voice devoid of anger, just laced with quiet contempt. "You were always like this. Always so damn righteous. So damn stupid." I tried to speak, but only a wet gurgle came out. "Save your breath, buddy," Brian chuckled. "What? You really thought we'd grow old together, stuffing our faces with cheap burgers and waiting for a joke of a pension?" He crouched beside me, his voice softening, almost friendly. "I gave you a chance, partner, but you turned your back on me first. That's why you lost." I lay in my own blood as he went to work. I heard the rustle of cash, the scrape of crates being dragged open. "Jesus, Charlie, look at all this," he marveled. "More money than most people see in a lifetime. And you wanted to hand it over to some bureaucrats?" I tried to move. Nothing. Then came the sharp, unmistakable scent of gasoline. I knew what was coming. But no, Brian sighed dramatically, his footsteps circling me as liquid splattered onto the pavement. He had to play the hero. And heroes, Charlie, he struck a match. The tiny flame flickered, reflecting in his eyes. Always die first. The match fell. Fire erupted instantly, a searing wave of heat swallowing everything. The flames licked hungrily at the concrete walls, consuming the crates of money, reducing them to smoldering embers. The heat was unbearable, clawing at my skin, burning the air from my lungs. Brian was already gone. I could hear the screech of his tires as he sped off into the night. He thought he'd left me to die. He was wrong. I gritted my teeth and tried to rise. My back burned with searing pain, the wounds still bleeding, but the fear of dying here in this fiery hell was stronger than the pain. Through the smoke, through the flickering tongues of fire, I desperately searched for any way out. The entrance was completely cut off by flames, as was the rear of the warehouse. The ceiling was beginning to collapse, burning beams crashing down, and the air was so thick with smoke that every breath felt like a battle. And then I noticed something strange. Right against the wall, beneath piles of debris and charred crates, there was a faintly visible metallic outline. Summoning the last of my strength, I crawled toward it, dragging my disobedient body across the scorched floor. When my fingers brushed against the metal, I realized it was a hatch, hidden beneath the floor covered in ash and grime, but unmistakably a hatch. I clenched my teeth and yanked on the handle. The hatch groaned, resisting, but finally gave way, revealing a dark abyss below. A gust of cool air rushed up from within. Without hesitation, I let myself slide down, plunging into the unknown. I crashed onto a concrete floor, landing hard on my side, but the pain no longer mattered. Down here it was cool. The air was free of smoke, and that alone was enough to spark a sliver of hope. Looking around, I realized I was in a narrow tunnel. The walls were solid concrete, electrical wiring snaking along the ceiling, and directly in front of me sat a small electric cart. The gang must have been using this passage to transport goods and money. With great effort, I pulled myself up and slumped into the driver's seat. My hands trembled, my vision blurred, but I forced myself to press the ignition button. The cart shuddered, its electric motor whirred, and I rolled forward, away from the burning inferno. I had no idea where this tunnel led. But one thing mattered, I was still alive. The cart rattled on rusted rails, carrying me deeper into the darkness. The air in the tunnel was thick, laced with dampness, metal, and the faint stench of decay. My head swam, my body felt heavier with every second, but I clenched my teeth and held on. I had no sense of time, whether it had been a minute, 10, or an hour. Suddenly, a dim light flickered ahead. The cart screeched to a halt against a concrete wall, where a narrow exit gaped open. I braced my shoulder against it and shoved. It gave way, and I crawled outside. Night greeted me, damp, cool, carrying the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves. I had emerged in some abandoned place, surrounded by thick undergrowth. An old underground passage led directly into the forest, hidden from prying eyes. This must have been a warehouse or a bunker long ago. Crumbling concrete blocks, overgrown with moss, jutted out from the ground. In the distance stood a rotting hangar. I collapsed to my knees, my hands shaking, my vision swimming. I was losing too much blood. My breathing turned ragged, the world tilting sideways. But I couldn't allow myself to die here, alone, like a wounded animal. With great effort, I pulled my phone from my pocket. My fingers trembled, the screen was smeared with blood, but I managed to dial number. Come on, pick up. Damn it, I rasped, feeling the cold creeping into my bones. The third ring. Then a voice, hoarse, groggy. Who is this? I recognized it instantly. Jackson. I clenched my teeth, forcing myself to speak clearly. I need help. Silence on the other end. Then a heavy sigh. Charlie? Jesus, where the hell are you? I couldn't hold on much longer, my vision already slipping away. Sending my location, I muttered and pressed the button. Jackson was a frontline medic. We had served together, and if anyone could pull me out of this, it was him. The last thing I heard before the darkness swallowed me was his voice, tense and sharp. "Hold on, brother. I'm coming." When consciousness began to return, the first thing I felt was pain. Searing, gnawing, drilling into every nerve like 1,000 burning needles. I couldn't move. Even breathing was a struggle. My head throbbed as if someone had driven a metal rod through my skull, my throat raw and tight. It took me a moment to realize where I was. A dim light flickered above me, the air thick with the scent of antiseptics, something sterile, yet tainted with a faint trace of gasoline and smoke. I blinked, trying to focus. A room. Old, worn down. A wooden ceiling, cracked plaster on the walls. The bed beneath me was hard, like a morgue slab. Finally, a familiar voice muttered. With great effort, I turned my head. In the corner, slouched in a rickety chair, holding a bottle of dark whiskey, sat Jackson. He looked exactly the same as years ago, lean, clad in a faded military jacket, streaks of gray running through his unkempt blonde hair. But his eyes, those had changed. Heavy, burnt out by life. "Jesus, Charlie, you look like you just crawled out of a crematorium." He smirked, but concern flickered behind his gaze. I tried to say something, but my throat was too dry. Without hesitation, he handed me a bottle of water. I took a small sip, coughing as sharp pain flared in my ribs. "Where am I?" I croaked. "Safe," Jackson said calmly. "Well, as safe as it gets. Pulled you out of that trash heap you were lying in. 10 more minutes, and the wild dogs would have found you first." I clenched my fists. Even that tiny movement sent black spots dancing in my vision. "Brian, that son of a bitch. Oh yeah? He roasted you good," Jackson said, leaning back. "Bullet tore through your back, went clean through your rib. You lost a goddamn river of blood. If I'd found you any later, you'd be chatting with angels. Or demons." I let my head drop back, my breathing heavy. My mind was racing, dark thoughts clawing at my skull. "Amanda," I muttered. Jackson studied me, then nodded, as if he'd been expecting this. I checked. "She and Rachel are safe. For now." Those words should have comforted me. Instead, they only tightened the cold grip inside my chest. "For now," I rasped. "As long as they think you're dead, Brian has no reason to touch them. But if he finds out you survived..." I clenched my teeth, the urge to grab my phone and call my wife nearly overwhelming. "I have to tell her." "No, you don't." Jackson cut me off sharply. He stood, stepping closer, gripping the back of the chair with both hands. "You're in no shape to protect them. Hell, you can't even stand, for fuck's sake. If you call Amanda now, you'll paint a target right on their backs." I closed my eyes, wrestling with the truth. She needs to know I'm alive. And what if Brian is watching her? Jackson's voice was cold, calculated. What if his men intercept the call? You think he'll let them walk free if he finds out you're still breathing? I said nothing. "Charlie," he continued, his tone softer now. "I know you want to protect them, but right now, the best way to do that is to let the world believe you died in that goddamn fire. Let Amanda grieve. Let her think you're gone. That's the only thing keeping Brian from going after them." I inhaled slowly. Pain stabbed through my ribs like another bullet. "Fuck," I whispered. "Fuck, yeah. Fuck," Jackson muttered, dropping back into his chair. "So lie still, heal up, and don't do anything stupid." I turned away, staring at the peeling ceiling. Amanda would have to believe I was dead. But when I was ready, when I was strong again, I would come back. The days blurred together, merging into an endless swamp of pain and helplessness. At first, I couldn't even lift my hand to drink water properly. My fingers felt dead, refusing to obey. I lay there, staring at the cracked ceiling, feeling weakness drain the last remnants of pride from me. But every morning, I reminded myself why I was still breathing. I pictured Brian's face, his smirk, his voice dripping with contempt. "You'll burn, bastard, and I'll be the one left standing." I clenched my teeth and forced myself to move. At first, I simply tried to make a fist. My uncooperative fingers trembled, foreign to me, slick with sweat, my muscles aching as if they had been filled with molten lead. "Come on, you son of a bitch," I growled through gritted teeth. I strained, teeth grinding, but my fist wouldn't close. So I started again. And again, and again. How's our dead man? Jackson stood in the doorway, arms crossed over his chest. He was here every day, but he never rushed to help. He knew, either I would drag myself out of this, or I wouldn't. Better than yesterday, I forced out, barely managing to lift my head. Well, then, it'll still be a while, he smirked, but I caught a flicker of respect in his eyes. Every day was hell. Pushing up onto my elbows felt like scaling a mountain. Taking a single step was like walking barefoot over broken glass. But I knew, once I could hold a gun again, once my muscles stopped betraying me with their tremors, the world would remember my name. I did push-ups even when my arms buckled, and I collapsed face-first onto the dusty floor. I struck the rough wooden post with my fists, even when my skin split and blood dripped onto the filth beneath me. I ran, even if at first it was only 5 minutes, each time a little longer. Jackson watched in silence. Only once, when I nearly collapsed from exhaustion, did he toss a bottle of water at my feet. Come on, Charlie. You're either a corpse or the man you used to be. Make up your mind. I knew who I used to be. I knew who I had to become now. And one day, when I looked in the mirror and saw myself, not a broken, hollow survivor, but a man with a cold, focused gaze, filled with only one purpose, I understood. I was back. I stared at the phone in my hand, my heartbeat hammering in my chest as if I were about to charge into another firefight. How much time had passed? A month? More? Amanda must have already made peace with my death. She had probably been through hell, mourning me, trying to figure out how to move on. And now, I was about to shatter all of that. I took a deep breath and dialed her number. Ringing. Once. Twice. 3 times. Hello. Her voice. A little muffled, tired. I opened my mouth, but couldn't force out a single word for a moment. Amanda. My voice came out hoarse, like a ghost clawing its way back from the grave. Silence. Long, heavy. Who is this? There was tension in her voice now. It's me, Charlie. This isn't funny, she snapped, almost angrily. Whoever you are, you have a sick sense of humor. I gripped the phone tighter. This isn't a joke, Amanda. It's real. Charlie is dead. Her voice cracked with pain, and something inside me twisted. I closed my eyes for a second, gathered my thoughts, and said quietly, Amanda, remember our first weekend trip together? You insisted on camping, and I accidentally pitched the tent right over a damn anthill. You laughed so hard you nearly fell into the river. And then we spent the whole night trying to stay warm under a single sleeping bag. Only the two of us know that. Silence again. I could hear her breathing, shaky, uneven. Charlie, her voice trembled. Yes, baby, it's me. I pictured her in that moment, her hand covering her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief, her whole body shaking. This isn't possible. I saw your body, Charlie. The death report. She was speaking too fast, stumbling over her words, as if trying to convince herself this was just a dream. That wasn't my body, Amanda. I survived, but I had to disappear. If Brian found out I was alive, you and Rachel will be next. She sucked in a sharp breath. Oh God, Charlie, Rachel. Something in her voice cut deeper than any bullet. Is she okay? I asked, my body tensing. Yes, Amanda choked on a sob. Yes, but she misses you so much, Charlie. She doesn't understand that you're gone. God, I can't believe this. I shut my eyes, clenched my teeth. You can't tell anyone. No one can know I'm alive. Not even Rachel. But Amanda, listen to me. We need to meet, but carefully. If anyone finds out, I'll lose my only chance to take Brian down. We'll meet at the old warehouse outside the city. You know the place. Yes, I know. She still hadn't fully processed that this was real, but her voice was steadier now. You can't involve anyone. No police, no old friends, no one. And if you feel like you're being followed, turn around and forget I ever called. Charlie, she hesitated. I am scared. I clenched my fist, but my voice remained steady. So am I, baby. But we don't have another choice. Be careful. I heard her take a nervous breath. Okay, I'll come. Then I'll see you soon, I said, ending the call before she could say another word. I closed my eyes. The game had begun. I arrived at the warehouse ahead of time. Not because I was in a hurry, but because I needed to make sure we weren't being followed. The place was abandoned, rust-covered walls, patches of mold, sections of the roof caved in, broken pallets, and garbage piled up in the corners. A perfect place for a meeting with a dead man. And yet I still believed that she would come alone. When I heard the sound of a car, my heart slammed hard against my ribs, as if the engine had seized. She stepped out of the darkness, stopping just a few steps away. Charlie. Her voice trembled, but not with fear, more with tension. I took a step forward, and she mirrored me. A single moment, and I was holding her in my arms. Real, warm, alive, but it lasted only a second. "I'm sorry, Charlie," she whispered, then coldly pulled away. The next instant, blinding light flared around me. I spun sharply, but I already knew what I would see. God damn it. I exhaled, squinting against the searing brightness of the floodlights. From the shadows, Brian stepped forward. His grin was wider than usual, his eyes alight with satisfaction. Well, Charlie, you really are impossible to kill, aren't you?" he chuckled, looking at me with genuine admiration. "Honestly, I thought you burned to ashes. That was unreal." I said nothing, my gaze shifting slowly from him to Amanda. She stood beside him now, no longer looking afraid. "How did you survive, partner?" Brian folded his arms across his chest. "Come on, explain to me. How the hell did you crawl out of the fire I so kindly sent you into?" I stayed silent, scanning the space around me, but there was no way out. I was already surrounded. A gang of scumbags, 7 or 8 of them, armed with bats, knives, one even gripping a machete. "Caught in a trap twice, Charlie." Brian shook his head, as if disappointed. "Do you ever learn from your mistakes? Or are you still playing the Avenger?" I looked at Amanda again. She met my gaze, smirked, and in her eyes, there wasn't a shred of remorse. Only cold hatred. "You really thought I loved you?" Her voice dripped with venom. "God, Charlie, you've always been so naive." Something inside me crumbled. "Amanda, oh, don't give me that wounded look," she cut me off. "I hated you. Always. You were pathetic, boring, a self-righteous cop who dragged me into your dull, gray life. But Brian, he was there. We planned this for a long time," Brian added, slipping an arm around her waist. "You were just the last obstacle. And I knew that day you wouldn't come home," Amanda hissed, savoring every word. "Because you could never agree. You're an honest cop, Charlie, and honest cops don't live long." I slowly clenched my fists. "And now it's all so much simpler," Brian continued, stretching his shoulders. "I run the cartel. More money than I ever dreamed of. And you're back in the gutter." I narrowed my eyes. "Where's Rachel?" Brian laughed. "Oh, don't worry, she's fine. For now. I wouldn't ruin her life. She's just temporarily unavailable. Let's say she's with some friends where no one will bother her. If you so much as lay a finger—" "Oh, shut up, Charlie." Brian waved a hand dismissively, as if swatting away an annoying fly. "You don't have anything left to worry about." He turned to his men. "Kill him, but not quickly. Break him first. Make him feel what it's like to lose everything." He looked at me one last time, smirked, then stepped back. "Then cut him into pieces and burn him, just to make sure the bastard doesn't crawl out of hell a second time." He opened the car door, helped Amanda inside, and before shutting it, waved at me. "Goodbye, partner." The engine roared to life, and they disappeared into the night. I turned my gaze back to the gang, who were already gripping their weapons, eager for the show. I took a deep breath. Well, I had escaped once. I'd do it again. I stood in a circle of predators, but I didn't feel like prey. They thought they had already buried me, that I would accept my fate like a corpse obediently settling into its grave. I smirked. "So assholes, who wants to see what their guts look like from the outside?" They exchanged glances. Someone snorted, but none of them rushed in first. Idiots weren't completely brainless. They could sense I wasn't going down easy. "What the hell are we waiting for?" grumbled one, a hulking brute with a bat. "He's a dead man. Let's just—" I didn't let him finish. A sharp step forward, a strike to the throat with the edge of my hand, a short, strangled gasp, and he collapsed, clutching at his neck as if trying to suck the air back into his lungs. The second one, a guy with a knife, was already lunging at me. I ducked under his arm and shoved him forward, right onto the jagged metal spike protruding from the wall. "Oh, sorry, buddy." I smirked as he writhed, trying to pull himself free. Bit of an overreaction, don't you think? From the corner of my eye, I saw two more coming at once. One swung a chain, the other raised a knife overhead like a clueless caveman. I sidestepped, caught the chain midair, and yanked it toward me. The bastard with the chain stumbled forward like a marionette and impaled himself face first onto his friend's knife. "Jesus, do you guys even train?" I scoffed, yanking the blade from his face and ramming it into the eye socket of the next idiot. Blood splattered over me, warm and thick, but I only grinned. "Come on, boys, pick up the pace. I'm getting bored." Someone screamed, charging with a bat, but I simply stepped aside, swept his legs out from under him, and as he fell forward, I drove his own bat into the back of his skull. He twitched, then went still, and that's when I saw it. The machete. Oh, hell yes, this was a gift from the gods. One of the last men standing had dropped it while fumbling for a pistol. I lunged, grabbed the machete, spun it in my hand, relishing the weight of steel. Well, ladies and gentlemen, now the real fun begins. I surged forward, and the blood symphony began. The machete sank into the nearest bastard's shoulder, slicing through bone and muscle like a hot knife through butter. He shrieked, but I didn't stop. I kicked to his knee, a blade under the ribs, and he choked on his own blood. The next one managed to swing a knife at me, but I lopped off his arm at the elbow. The blade and his severed hand hit the floor together. "Hey, no need to fall apart like that," I grinned. "Get it together." He screamed, clutching at the stump, but I was already moving. One slash, the machete buried in his gut. A twist, his inside spilled onto the floor like overcooked spaghetti. "Damn, buddy, ever heard of portion control?" I sneered, watching him desperately try to shove his intestines back in, as if that would help. The last one, the luckiest of them all, lay on the ground, gasping, cut up but still breathing. I stepped closer, crouched beside him, and drove the machete into the floor between his legs. "Well, brother, I've got just one question for you. Where did Brian go?" He let out a ragged breath, trying to turn away, but I grabbed his hair and yanked his head back sharply. "You do realize I'm just getting warmed up?" I said with a smile. "But if you tell me where that son of a bitch is, maybe I'll just slit your throat and be done with it." Silence. I sighed, raised the machete, and chopped off his pinky. "Yeah," he howled like a wounded dog. "Oh, poor thing," I mocked, putting on a sympathetic face. "Hurts, doesn't it?" Now imagine how I felt, lying in a pool of my own blood while that bastard waved me goodbye. He whimpered, his body shaking from the pain. "Where is Brian?" At the base," he rasped, barely able to breathe. "The cartel estate." I smirked. "Now we're talking. And where exactly is this goddamn estate?" He blinked rapidly, trying to glance at the machete still clenched in my hand. "South in the mountains, an old plantation. Huge gates, guards, lots of people. How many? Dozens, hundreds, you won't get in." I chopped off another finger. "Yeah, fuck, you're insane. All I hear is whining. Where's the useful information?" He gasped, convulsing, but I grabbed him by the throat and squeezed. "Last chance," I whispered. Okay. The main gate has at least 10 guards, machine guns, cameras. It's serious." His voice cracked into a scream. "But there's a tunnel, an old supply tunnel. It leads straight into the wine cellars. They don't use it often, but it's still there." I nodded, standing up. "Now that's more like it." He looked up at me with desperate hope. "You gonna let me go?" I smiled. "No." The machete sank into his throat, and he gurgled, spraying blood across the floor. I wiped my face with the back of my hand and took a deep breath. Now I had an address. Brian thought he had one. He thought money and power made him untouchable. But he forgot one thing. I was already a dead man, and dead men fear nothing. The road to the cartel estate was long and dark, but the fire inside me burned hot enough to scorch the night itself. I had stolen a car from one of the corpses I left behind and was now speeding through the darkness, adrenaline pumping in my veins. The headlights cut through the blackness, the engine roared, and only one thought echoed in my mind: burn it all to the ground. I knew a frontal assault was suicide. Brian wasn't stupid. He had probably stationed his entire army along the walls, expecting that if by some miracle I survived, I'd come charging through the front gate, waving a gun and blind heroism. But I wasn't stupid either. When I turned off the highway onto a side road, I was met with towering stone walls wrapped in barbed wire, and beyond them, massive steel gates with silhouettes of armed men standing guard. I didn't waste time staring. I ditched the car in the bushes, slung a bag of stolen knives over my shoulder, souvenirs from the dead gangsters, and moved into the darkness. The old tunnel. If that bastard hadn't lied before he bled out, it would be my ticket inside. The tunnel was well hidden behind thick brush at the base of the hill leading to the estate. A set of rusted metal gates, secured with an ancient padlock, made it clear no one had used it in a long time. How touching, I muttered, pulling out my machete. A couple of solid swings, and the lock clattered to the ground. I slipped inside, moving cautiously through the narrow passage, its walls thick with cobwebs and mold. The stench of damp rot filled my nostrils, but I pressed forward, knowing that at the other end of this tunnel, a far more satisfying scent awaited me, the scent of Brian's blood. The exit led me into a wine cellar. Long rows of wooden barrels, shelves stacked with dusty bottles, dim lighting from overhead lamps, and two guards lazily playing cards at a small table. I drew a knife. 8 of hearts. One of them yawned. Bullshit, I got an ace. The other smirked, reaching for a bottle. He never got the chance to grab it. I struck from the shadows, fast as a viper, and drove my blade deep into his throat. His flesh tore like wet paper, blood spraying across the table, drenching the cards and bottles. The second one jolted, reaching for his gun, but I caught his wrist, yanked him forward, and snapped it like a dry twig. He shrieked, but I silenced him with a knife under the ribs, twisting it deep. Take it easy, I whispered into his ear, watching as his eyes glazed over with death. Let's enjoy the moment. He shuddered, wheezed, and went limp. I carefully laid their bodies on the floor, wiped my blade on their shirts, and scanned the room. The wine cellar stretched into an underground corridor. A place like this had to have an armory. I moved through the estate like a ghost, silent and unseen. The guards I encountered didn't last long. Quick stabs to the kidneys, snapped necks, sharp strikes to the temple. This wasn't just killing. This was preparation. When I finally found the armory, I let out a low whistle. Well, this is a goddamn jackpot. The room was packed. Racks of assault rifles, shotguns, pistols, crates of ammunition, even grenades. A sniper rifle sat on the table, beside a row of bulletproof vests. But my eyes locked onto something else immediately. A grenade launcher. I picked it up, savoring the weight of the metal, a slow grin spreading across my face. Oh, Brian, you're really not going to like this. I quickly strapped on a bulletproof vest, slung an assault rifle over my shoulder, stuffed a few grenades into my pockets, and secured the grenade launcher to my belt. All that was left now was to head upstairs and turn this cartel estate into a blazing hell. But first, I had to deal with the army outside before they realized they had an uninvited guest. I knew one thing. If I started the massacre inside, this whole hornet's nest would swarm the building. These weren't just some street thugs. They were cartel soldiers trained to shoot, kill, and ask no questions. They were expecting a threat from the outside, so I'd make sure death came from within. I crept toward a narrow window that overlooked the estate's back courtyard. Below, right in front of the massive steel gates, sat a machine of death, a heavily armored SUV, mounted with a monstrous turret that looked like it didn't fire bullets but spat molten chunks of hell. The gunner was slouched lazily over the weapon, absent-mindedly picking his teeth and glancing at his watch, probably counting the minutes until his shift ended. Just another relaxed bastard convinced no one would dare touch him. I smiled. Slipping down toward the vehicle, I moved silently, creeping up behind him. I rose over his shoulder like a shadow of divine wrath, blocking the light. Sensing something was off, he turned his head slightly. The hell? I grabbed his throat, my fingers clamping down like a steel trap, and with a violent jerk, I ripped his goddamn larynx out. Blood sprayed in a fountain. He gurgled, clutching at the gaping hole in his neck, while I casually shoved his body off the armor like a bag of trash. "Shift's over, asshole," I muttered, taking his place. I scanned the courtyard. 20 men, maybe more. They were lounging around, chatting, smoking, checking their weapons, completely unaware that their death warrants had already been signed. I fired up the SUV's engine. The deep roar of the motor echoed across the yard, but no one had realized what was happening yet. I rolled the vehicle into position. I took aim. "Good morning, you miserable bastards." I pulled the trigger, and all hell broke loose. The turret screamed to life, spewing explosive rounds, turning the courtyard into a slaughterhouse. The first shot tore 2 men to shreds, their bodies flung apart like discarded ragdolls. The second round caught a guy mid-motion, tearing both his arms off. His stumps still twitched as he face-planted into the dirt. The rest finally realized what was happening. Too late. One of them sprinted for cover, but I fired at the concrete pillar behind him. A massive chunk of stone collapsed onto his head, turning him into a bloody smear. Another tried to run, but I tracked him with the turret, locked onto him, and obliterated him into a mist of flesh and bone. Bodies exploded. Walls were painted with thick splashes of meat and blood. The air stank of gunpowder and burning flesh. The cartel dogs fired back, but the SUV's armor ate their bullets, and I kept shredding them apart like a butcher tearing through carcasses. One survivor bolted left, hoping to duck behind a concrete wall. I saw him, took aim, fired. His torso simply vanished. "Oh, buddy, you only half covered yourself." I chuckled, staring at what was left of him. Some started running. I didn't give them a chance. An explosive round to the back. Intestines painted the ground in a grotesque arc. A burst into a group of 3, flesh and limbs scattered across the yard. A headshot. His skull popped like a watermelon under a sledgehammer. Within a minute, the courtyard had transformed into a living nightmare. Smoke from the gunfire choked the air, mixing with the heavy stench of blood, fear, and death. The place was a goddamn slaughterhouse. And now, there was no army left. Just piles of shredded corpses and a few poor bastards still clinging to life by some miracle. Now, only Brian and Amanda remained. I wiped my face, smearing blood across my cheek, and stepped out of the SUV. Time to collect the grand prize. I leapt down, feeling hot blood and adrenaline coursing through my veins. The courtyard was a graveyard of twisted bodies, shredded meat, and growing pools of crimson. The air reeked of scorched flesh and ruptured organs. The massacre had only just begun. I slung my rifle over my shoulder, but I didn't need it anymore. I took a step forward, smiling as I pulled the grenade launcher free. Oh, this was the perfect tool for chaos. With my first steps toward the main entrance, I locked onto a group of remaining guards. Instead of fighting, they were already running, scrambling toward the building, trying to save their pathetic hides. "Where are you going, assholes? The party's just getting started." I pulled the trigger. The grenade soared through the air, whistling like a damned soul. A second later, the 3 cowards were nothing but a red mist. Chunks of flesh and shattered bones rained down onto the courtyard. The others screamed, scattering in pure terror. But I wasn't letting any of them live. A second shot. 2 more bodies evaporated in an inferno, their cries drowned by the explosion's roar. I turned, my gaze settling on a massive storage warehouses in the back. Rumor had it the cartel stored their drugs, weapons, and all their dirty secrets there. I grinned. "Well, Brian, let's see how it feels to lose everything." Another grenade flew. The explosion rocked the air, ripping the warehouse doors off their hinges. A second later, fuel barrels ignited. The flames erupted like a raging inferno, black smoke swallowing the sky, turning the estate into a goddamn apocalyptic wasteland. But I wasn't done. My eyes locked onto the garage. Luxury cars, expensive supercars, armored SUVs, even a goddamn Maybach. I smirked, aimed, and fired twice. Boom! Boom! Adrenaline surged through my veins as the blast wave rolled across the courtyard, ripping through the vehicles like tin cans. Brian, I bet you're losing your shit watching this on your security cameras. I yelled, imagining that bastard panicking in his surveillance room, watching his empire burn to ashes. I stepped toward the entrance, smoke curling around me, leaving a trail of fire in my wake. One last shot. I took aim at the mansion's massive doors and fired straight at the center. The grenade slammed into the wood, and in the next instant, the entrance shattered into splinters. The explosion was so powerful that even the mansion's walls trembled, and the doorway, along with the adjacent hall, vanished into a cloud of dust, smoke, and flying debris. Without waiting for the dust to settle, I stepped inside. Smoldering chunks of wood littered the marble floor. Furniture lay scattered, and the air was thick with the acrid stench of smoke and gunpowder. I let the still-smoking grenade launcher drop to the floor, where it clattered and rolled to the side. Honey, I'm home. Inside the mansion, the air reeked of death, fire, and agony. The once luxurious hallways were now littered with bodies, the walls streaked with blood, a thick haze of smoke hanging overhead. I moved forward, swift and deadly, cutting down anyone still foolish enough to resist. The first bastard lunged out from behind a column with a shotgun, but I already knew he was there. By the time he pulled the trigger, I had already rolled to the side and put a bullet straight through his eye. His head snapped back like a puppet with cut strings, his body crumpling to the marble floor, painting it in red. The second one tried to hide behind a door, but I simply kicked it in, slamming it full force in his face, shattering his nose and knocking out his teeth. He screamed, but I didn't give him a chance. One swift motion, and my knife sank deep into his liver. Another one burst from a side corridor, gripping an assault rifle, but his hands were shaking. I just smirked. What's wrong, buddy? Never seen a ghost before. He tried to raise his weapon, but I was already on him. A rifle butt to the throat, a strangled gasp, and he collapsed to his knees, clawing at his crushed windpipe, choking on his own breath. I stepped over him and headed for the grand staircase. At the top, the doors to Brian's office. But 3 men stood in my way. They weren't like the others. They weren't trembling. They weren't running. They simply stood there, each holding a long, slightly curved knife, watching me like a pack of wolves eyeing their prey. One was tall and wiry, his arms crisscrossed with scars. The second was short but thick-built, with the cold, dead eyes of a killer. The third was silent, expressionless, his face a mask of calm. I stopped studying them. So, gentlemen, which of you wants to die first? The tall one smirked and stepped forward. You're already dead. You just haven't realized it yet. Yeah, sure, I muttered, drawing my knife. He lunged, fast, a flash of steel in the chandelier's glow. I barely had time to dodge. The blade sang through the air, leaving a thin arc, and I felt a sharp sting along my side. Shit, he clipped me. I stepped back, touched the wound. My fingers came away red. The short one struck next. A feint to the left, then a sudden lunge right, boxing me in. I dodged, but his knife raked across my shoulder, carving a deep line. Warm blood trickled down my arm, but I only grinned. All right, you bastards, you want to play? Let's play. I shot forward like a bullet, driving my knife straight into the short one's liver. He let out a wet gasp, but before he could react, I jerked the blade upward, ripping through his insides. Blood gushed from his mouth, his breath hitched, and he dropped, already dead. The tall one roared and charged, his knife slashing for my throat. I barely leaned back in time, but he still grazed my ribs, sending a fresh jolt of pain searing through my body. Gritting my teeth, I caught his wrist, twisted. His elbow snapped with a sickening crunch. He howled, but I didn't give him a chance. My knife plunged into his throat. He clutched at the wound, gurgling, but I yanked the blade free and shoved him aside. One left, the cold, silent one. He wasn't afraid. He simply adjusted his grip on his knife. Bastard, he muttered. Yeah, that's me. I moved first. A feint to the left. He went a block, but it was a trick. I ducked under his arm, spun, and buried my knife deep under his ribs. He froze. Shit, he breathed. Yeah, shit. I ripped the blade upward. His guts spilled onto the floor, and he collapsed face first into his own blood. I wiped my face, feeling the warm rivulets trickling down my skin. 3 dead bodies lay at my feet. Now, only Brian remained. I kicked open the office door, sending it crashing against the wall. Brian's office was large, luxurious, tall windows, leather chairs, a massive blackwood desk. But I only saw him. Brian stood by the bar, holding a bottle of expensive whiskey, pouring himself a full glass. He didn't look scared. He looked annoyed. "Jesus Christ, Charlie," he muttered, taking a sip before setting the glass down. He turned to face me. "Are you serious? You really came here alone and pulled off this whole damn circus?" I stepped forward, eyes locked onto his. "Where is she?" I hissed. Brian tilted his head, squinting as if trying to decipher the question. Then his lips curled into a smirk. "Oh, you mean Amanda?" I didn't respond. I just stared. "Well, see, old friend, your ex-wife turned out to be a clever little bitch. The moment she realized you were still alive, she bailed. First thing she did was grab as much money as she could carry and vanish." He chuckled. "So, I'm afraid you won't be finding her." I nodded slowly. "So that means you're alone." "Seems that way." He shrugged, raising his glass. "Well then, let's drink to that." I shot him in the knee. A crack of bone, a wet burst of flesh. Brian's scream tore through the office as he crashed to the floor, blood splattering across the pristine white carpet. His glass tumbled from his hand and shattered. "You son of a bitch," he howled, writhing in pain. "Are you fucking serious, Charlie?" I stepped closer. Slow, unhurried. He twisted on the floor, clutching his ruined knee, gasping for breath. "Where's my daughter?" I asked, voice deathly quiet. Brian froze, breathing hard, shaking. "Go to hell." I shot him in the other leg. The office filled with his agonized scream. I leaned over him, grabbed him by the hair, and yanked his head up. "This is the last time I'm asking. Where is Rachel?" His eyes fluttered rapidly. His breath came in ragged gasps. Sweat dripped down his face, and his lips trembled. "They took her to the warehouse at the port," he rasped. "The cartel guys, they grab her. She was asking too many questions. She didn't believe her daddy just died. She kept digging, so they decided to keep her there. I thought you were dead." I slowly straightened. "So she's alive?" Yes. I swear she is." "Well then," I chuckled, holstering my gun. "Now let's deal with you." His eyes widened. "Charlie, come on, let's just end this, huh? Just make it quick." I shook my head. "Quick," I scoffed. "You killed me, Brian. Left me to burn alive. You betrayed me. You took my family away from me. And now you want me to give you an easy death." He swallowed hard, terror twisting his face. "Please." I wasn't listening. I pulled out my knife and got to work. I drove it into his left hand, slicing through the tendons, leaving him completely useless. He screamed, his body convulsing, but I was already moving on. I slit open his abdomen, not deep, but just enough for him to feel his insides begin to sag. "Charlie, please." "What, Brian?" "It hurts." I leaned in closer. "Imagine how it felt when you left me to burn alive." He wheezed, struggling to speak, but I could already see the panic in his eyes. I pulled out a grenade. His breathing hitched, his face contorted in pure horror. "Charlie, oh no," I smirked. "You were always a greedy bastard, Brian. Always biting off more than you could chew. Well, chew on this." I shoved the grenade into his mouth. He choked, his eyes bulging, trying to spit it out, but I simply clamped his jaws shut with my hand. "Chew, motherfucker." He thrashed, trying to break free, but I grabbed him by the collar and dragged him toward the window. He shook his head wildly, tears streaming down his face. "Goodbye, partner." I hurled him out the window. He plummeted several meters before splattering across the marble courtyard. A second later, the grenade exploded, blasting his head into chunks. I stood at the shattered window, inhaling the scent of smoke and blood, feeling the weight of the past years lift with every breath. But I wasn't done yet. Rachel was waiting for me, and now that Brian was dead, I was going to carve through every bastard who dared to lay a hand on her. The car tore through the night, the engine growling, and it felt like the faster I drove, the sooner I could bring my daughter home. But even with the gas pedal slammed to the floor, time crawled unbearably slow. I tried to imagine what Rachel was feeling right now. She was probably scared, confused, wondering why her father hadn't come for her sooner. They told her I was dead. Maybe she had already accepted it. I gripped the steering wheel tightly. No, baby. I'm not dead yet. As I entered the port district, the streets were deserted. Stacks of shipping containers loomed like a damn maze, their metal walls reflecting the flickering glow of scattered streetlights. Warehouse 17. I pulled into a narrow alley and killed the engine. Parking right at the front gate would be suicide. Now, I needed silence. I moved forward, slipping through the shadows, until I spotted the first bastard. He stood by the warehouse entrance, lazily smoking, an assault rifle hanging from his other hand. I crept up behind him, soundless, a predator on the hunt. Shit, this is so boring, he muttered, stretching, and in the next second, my hand clamped over his mouth and my knife plunged into his kidney. He gurgled, tried to struggle, but I twisted the blade, and he slumped to the ground. I grabbed his rifle, slung it over my shoulder, and kept moving. Now inside, I reached the warehouse doors, eased them open, and peered inside. Rachel sat tied to a chair in the center of the room. Her head was bowed, tear streaks lined her cheeks, and her lips trembled. Around her, 3 bastards. So what now, kid? One of them sneered, polishing his knife. Daddy didn't come. Looks like he really is dead. Oh, come on, another chuckled. That son of a bitch is cocky as hell. If he's alive, he'll come. The third, the biggest of them, stretched and glanced at his watch. If he does, that's worse for him. We were told to get rid of the girl tomorrow. But if Daddy shows up, well, that just means double the work. I closed my eyes for a second. They were dead. All 3 of them. Slowly, I stepped inside, raised a rifle, and blew the first one's face off. Blood, bone, and brain matter exploded across the room like a rotten pumpkin smashing against pavement. The second barely had time to reach for his pistol. I was already on him. I grabbed him by the neck, spun him around, and drove my knife deep in his thigh, slicing through his artery. He screamed, but I quickly slashed his throat, and his body collapsed onto the grimy concrete. One left, big, stupid, confident his muscles could save him. He lunged at me with a knife, but I easily sidestepped, caught his wrist, and twisted until I heard the crunch. Oh, fuck. I drove my knee into his groin, then with a brutal swing, buried my knife into his eye socket. He didn't scream, just shuddered, clutching at his face, and dropped. I exhaled, blood dripping from my blade, but I didn't care. Rachel. I turned around and saw her staring at me. Her eyes were wide, her breathing unsteady. Dad, she whispered. I moved quickly, pulled out my knife, and cut the ropes. It's okay, baby. You're safe now. She threw herself at me, burying her face in my shoulder. They said you were dead. I ran a hand through her hair, holding her tightly. They were wrong. She let out a quiet sob, but I gently pulled away, gripping her shoulders, looking her in the eyes. We need to go. Now. She nodded. I wrapped an arm around her and led her out of the warehouse, leaving nothing behind but death. I found her 2 weeks later. She thought she had disappeared, bought herself a new life, far from blood and pain. She thought she had left me behind, buried under ashes and corpses. But I always finish what I start. When I entered the luxury hotel suite, Amanda was standing by the window, sipping a glass of wine. She looked relaxed, dressed in an elegant silk gown, her hair styled in a deliberately effortless bun. She didn't notice me at first. Luxury suits you, I said calmly. She flinched. The glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the marble floor, red wine spreading like spilled blood. She whirled around, her eyes widening in horror. Charlie, she whispered. You? I took a step forward. She took a step back. You really thought I'd just let you walk away after everything? Her breath hitched, her lips trembled, but she quickly tried to regain control. Listen, Charlie, this isn't what you think, she started, but I raised a hand, cutting her off. Oh, it's exactly what I think, Amanda. You sold me out. You sold our daughter. You sold your miserable soul for a pile of cash and a life of luxury. I gestured around the room. Opulent decor, expensive furniture, silk curtains. But I have bad news for you. I opened the side door. Inside was a room stacked to the ceiling with money. Bundles of cash piled on the floor, the bed, the tables. The fortune she had stolen, the money she thought would buy her a new life. She looked at it, then back at me. "Charlie, what are you?" I pulled a lighter from my pocket, flicked the wheel, and a small flame danced in the darkness. "Smell that." I tilted my head. "That's gasoline." She gasped and lunged forward, but I raised a hand, warning her. "Stay right there." She froze, fear and hatred swirling in her eyes. "Charlie, please, we can talk." I smirked. "We already talked." I tossed the lighter. The fire ignited instantly, racing across the gasoline-soaked bills, roaring toward the ceiling, swallowing the stacks of money in hungry flames. Amanda screamed. "No, no." She ran into the room, grabbing burning bills, trying to save anything she could. I watched as she moved frantically, possessed, clawing at the fire, until her dress, soaked in gasoline, caught the flames. She shrieked as fire engulfed her. She slapped at it, trying to put it out, but only spread it further, turning herself into a living torch. "Charlie, help me." I stood in the doorway and watched. She spun, a burning whirlwind, howling, stumbling, trying to escape, but I was already turning away. Her screams followed me as I walked out, but I didn't care anymore. I had closed the book. A month later, I sat on the porch of a small, quiet house by the lake, watching Rachel play with the dog on the lawn. I had found her. We had made it out. Now, I had a little business, something simple, something legal, far from blood and crime. We bought a roadside cafe, made the best coffee in town, and every morning started with silence, not gunfire. Rachel laughed as the puppy jumped around her, and I took a sip of coffee, inhaling the crisp, clean air. Hell was behind us. Now, there was only life.